Lieutenant Nathan Reyes stumbled out of the battered escape pod, coughing against the acrid smell of burnt wiring and scorched metal. His ship, the Vanguard Echo, had gone down somewhere in the Zerithian cluster after a critical engine failure. The terrain was foreign, a mix of iridescent purple moss and jagged black rocks, but the air was breathable. His training kicked in as he surveyed the area, checking for threats, then for salvageable equipment. The silence was almost unnerving, until a low hum broke it. A sleek, triangular vessel hovered nearby, its engines barely making a sound as it settled onto the ground. From the ship's ramp, a figure emerged. Lynn, a Zerithian diplomat, was a vision of alien elegance. Her tall, willowy frame moved with deliberate grace, and the soft blue glow of her skin contrasted against the harsh landscape. Nathan instinctively straightened, his hand brushing against the empty holster at his hip. "You are fortunate we detected your distress signal," Lynn said, her voice melodic yet edged with curiosity. "Few would survive a crash here. Are you injured?" Nathan shook his head. "Just a few bruises." "Who are you?" "I am Lynn, an envoy of the Zerithian Commonwealth. My ship was nearby on a diplomatic mission. When we picked up your signal, it seemed prudent to investigate." Her gaze swept over his battered flight suit. "And you? A member of the human navy, I presume?" "Something like that," Nathan replied. He wasn't sure how much he could trust her yet. "So what now? You came here just to save me?" Lynn's lips pressed into a thin line. "I thought humans appreciated rescue efforts. Was I mistaken?" Nathan sighed. "I do appreciate it, but I don't like being a burden. If you can point me to a comm relay or a nearby outpost, I'll take care of the rest." "You seem to misunderstand the situation," Lynn replied, stepping closer. "This area is remote. The closest outpost is several light-years away, and your human technology is insufficient to get you there without help." "Well, you've got a ship," Nathan pointed out. "You could drop me at the outpost. My mission does not permit unnecessary deviations." Her voice was calm but firm. "And you are in no condition to make demands." Nathan's frustration simmered just beneath the surface. He glanced back at his escape pod, now half buried in the moss. "Then what do you suggest? Am I supposed to just wait here until I die?" Lynn tilted her head, the faint bioluminescent patterns on her skin shifting subtly. "I am offering you temporary refuge aboard my vessel. Once my mission concludes, I can deliver you to a secure location. In the meantime, you may assist me in ensuring my ship remains functional and safe. Consider it a fair trade for my assistance." "Fair trade, huh?" Nathan's tone was skeptical, but he knew he didn't have many options. "Fine, I'll help where I can. But don't think for a second that I'm here to just sit around and wait for you to fix everything." Lynn's expression softened slightly, though it was still difficult for him to read. "That is acceptable." The next few hours were spent recovering supplies from the escape pod and loading them into Lynn's ship. Nathan noted the efficient layout of her vessel's interior, a stark contrast to the more utilitarian designs he was used to. The Zerithian ship was smaller, sleeker, and surprisingly well-maintained. As they worked, the silence between them gradually gave way to conversation, brief exchanges at first, then longer discussions about their respective missions, the technology they used, and the vast cultural differences between their species. Nathan found himself both intrigued and irked by Lynn's calm demeanor. She was always poised, never rushing, and never appearing rattled. When a storage crate slipped from his grip, nearly crashing onto the deck, she caught it effortlessly, her slender arms belying their strength. Instead of scolding him, she simply said, "Careful. Our resources are limited." "I've noticed," Nathan muttered, wiping his brow. "You always this calm under pressure?" "I prefer to think before acting," she replied. "It prevents unnecessary complications." "Must be nice," Nathan said, though his tone lacked malice. "I'm used to having to make split-second decisions. Comes with the territory." "I imagine so," Lynn replied, though she didn't elaborate. As the hours passed, Nathan began to understand the ship's layout, its advanced systems, and even a few of its quirks. Lynn, meanwhile, seemed to adjust to his presence. When he suggested a more efficient way to secure the supplies, she considered it without the haughty dismissal he expected. Her approval, though subtle, felt earned. After securing the last crate, Nathan leaned against the wall of the cargo hold, catching his breath. So, what exactly is your mission? If I'm tagging along, I might as well know what I'm in for. Lin hesitated. It is a diplomatic endeavor intended to prevent further conflicts along our border regions. Your presence here is an anomaly, one I will have to explain carefully. Sounds like a lot of red tape, Nathan said with a shrug. But as long as I'm not causing more trouble, I'll stay out of your way. I do not expect you to be idle, Lin said, meeting his gaze. You are capable and your assistance will be valuable. That almost sounds like a compliment, Nathan remarked. Perhaps it is, she replied, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. In the days that followed, they settled into an uneasy partnership. Nathan repaired minor damage to the ship using human ingenuity and a willingness to try unconventional methods. Lin guided him through tasks he couldn't understand on his own, her instructions precise and patient, though they still argued, his impulsiveness clashing with her meticulous approach. They found a rhythm, a strange harmony born from necessity. One evening, after a particularly grueling repair session, they sat in the ship's small galley, sharing a meal of preserved rations. The taste was less than stellar, but it was sustenance. Nathan studied Lin as she ate, her movements measured and deliberate. He couldn't help but wonder what drove her, what lay beneath the composed exterior. You ever get tired of this? He asked, breaking the silence. The missions, the constant diplomacy? Lin paused, considering his question. It is not a matter of fatigue. It is a responsibility. One I accepted long ago. Sounds lonely, Nathan said. Perhaps, she admitted. But it is necessary. He nodded, then looked down at his own meal. I guess I can understand that. Duty's a hell of a motivator. They fell into a companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The hum of the ship's engines provided a steady backdrop, a reminder of the world outside their tenuous alliance. Though their cultures and experiences were worlds apart, they began to find common ground, not just in their work, but in their quiet conversations, their shared meals, and the growing sense that they were no longer just a stranded human and a reluctant savior. They were, slowly but surely, becoming a team. Chapter 2, The Trade-Off. Nathan crouched under the main console, squinting at a tangled mess of conduits and shimmering Zorithian wiring. The inner workings of Lin's ship were fascinating, complex circuits pulsing faint blue light through translucent material, but completely alien to him. Not for the first time, he wondered how he'd ended up in this situation, stranded on a foreign planet, relying on an alien diplomat for survival. And now, apparently, acting as her unofficial mechanic. Pass me that tool, he said, pointing toward the small, triangular device sitting on the floor nearby. Lin raised an eyebrow from where she stood. Which one? You will need to be more specific. The shiny one with the handle. Looks kind of like a wrench. She reached down, selecting the tool and holding it up. This one. Yes, that one. He reached for it, only for Lin to hesitate. Are you certain you know what you're doing? If you damage the power couplings? Relax, I'm not going to break anything. I've handled repairs in worse conditions, Nathan replied, taking the tool from her and ducking back into the console's depths. Your ship's got a more sophisticated system than I'm used to, sure, but the basics aren't that different. Power goes in, power comes out. Just gotta make sure it's going where it's supposed to. Lin folded her arms, her expression skeptical. Your confidence is interesting, considering you admitted just yesterday that you'd never seen Zorithian technology before. Well, maybe I'm a fast learner, Nathan shot back, grinning to himself as he carefully tightened a connector. Or maybe I just don't have much choice. Either way, I'm getting it done. I still fail to see why you insist on doing this yourself, she said. I've already explained that I could handle the repairs on my own. Nathan pushed back out from under the console, giving her an exasperated look. Because I don't like sitting around twiddling my thumbs. You saved me, sure, but I'm not just gonna hang out while you do all the work. Besides, he motioned toward the glowing cables and faintly humming circuits. I'm actually starting to figure this out. I might even be useful. Lin regarded him for a long moment, her bioluminescent patterns faintly shifting in the low light. You are different from what I expected. Thanks, I guess, Nathan said, brushing dust off his hands and standing up. Look, you want this fixed or not? She sighed, gesturing toward the console. Continue, then. But if you cause a system failure, I will not be held responsible for the consequences. Deal, he replied, diving back into the tangled mess with renewed determination. As the hours stretched on, the two of them worked side by side. E.S. Lin's methodical approach often clashed with Nathan's more improvisational style, but they managed to make progress. He asked questions, sometimes exasperating her, but she answered nonetheless. And, occasionally, she'd correct his technique or demonstrate a better way to handle a particular component. Gradually, their initial tension began to ease. During a lull in their work, Nathan leaned back against a bulkhead, wiping sweat from his brow. "So, do you do this kind of thing often? Rescuing stranded humans? Fixing broken ships?" Eslin's lips curved slightly in what he could only interpret as a faint smile. "No. My usual duties involve negotiations, diplomacy, and mediation. Not mechanical repairs." "Figures," Nathan said, chuckling. "I mean, you don't exactly scream engineer, but you're not bad at this. Neither are you, despite your unconventional methods." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," he said, glancing at her. "So what's a diplomat like you doing out here in the middle of nowhere? I thought Zerithians were all about keeping their borders secure, not wandering into the wilds." "My mission is to maintain stability in these regions," she said. "The outer territories can be unpredictable, and we prefer to address potential issues before they escalate. My presence here is a precaution." Nathan nodded slowly, considering her words. "So you're like a peacekeeper?" "Not exactly. I am an envoy, not a soldier. My role is to communicate, mediate, and, if necessary, resolve disputes." "Sounds like a lot of pressure." Eslin shrugged lightly. "It is simply my duty." Nathan grinned. "You Zerithians sure love that word, duty. You ever just, relax? Kick back. Enjoy yourself." "I find fulfillment in my work," she replied, though there was a flicker of something in her expression. Something that hinted at uncertainty. "But I suppose the concept of relaxation is not foreign to me." "Good to know," Nathan said. "Because if we keep it this much longer, we're both gonna need a break." They shared a brief moment of mutual understanding, no more snide remarks, no more guarded politeness. Just two people, one human and one Zerithian, tackling a challenge together. It wasn't much, but it felt like progress. By the time the repairs were finished, the sun, or rather the closest star, was dipping low on the horizon, casting long shadows through the viewport. Nathan stretched, his muscles aching, and glanced at E.S. Lin. "We did it. Power's back on, systems are stable, and the ship's not falling apart. Not bad for a couple of amateurs, huh?" E.S. Lin tilted her head, the faint glow of her skin catching the light. "You have performed adequately, Nathan Reyes. Perhaps even commendably." He laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." As they stood there, the air between them felt a little less heavy, a little more open. Nathan wasn't sure what the next challenge would be, but for now, he was just glad they'd managed to keep the ship in one piece. And though he'd never admit it out loud, he was starting to appreciate E.S. Lin's calm presence, her steady guidance, even if she did have a habit of pointing out his mistakes. Maybe, just maybe, they made a decent team. Chapter 3, Unspoken Bonds. The glowing light strips along the corridor pulsed faintly, a soothing rhythm that mirrored the gentle hum of the ship's engines. Nathan was still adjusting to the Zerithian aesthetic, everything smooth, seamless, and bathed in a bluish hue. It was alien, sure, but not unpleasant. In fact, it was starting to feel oddly comfortable. He stopped outside the main observation deck, hesitating for a moment before stepping inside. E.S. Lin was already there, standing at the massive, curved viewport. The endless expanse of stars framed her silhouette, making her glow faintly in the dim light. She didn't turn to acknowledge him, but he knew she was aware of his presence. "Something wrong?" Nathan asked, his voice breaking the silence. E.S. Lin's head tilted slightly, though she still faced the viewport. "I was simply reflecting on our situation. It is complicated." "Complicated's one word for it," Nathan said, moving closer. He leaned against the railing that bordered the window, looking out at the same stars. "But we're managing, aren't we?" "For now," she replied. "But it is not without difficulty." "That's life," Nathan said with a shrug. "Difficult's part of the deal." E.S. Lin finally turned to face him, her expression inscrutable. "You are very accepting of your circumstances. Even after losing your ship, your crew." "I don't have much choice," Nathan interrupted, though his tone remained calm. "I mean, what am I gonna do? Sit around feeling sorry for myself? Doesn't help anyone?" Her eyes searched his face as if trying to understand his reasoning. "Humans are strange." He smirked. "You're just figuring that out now?" "I have always known that humans are different," E.S. Lin said, stepping closer. but experiencing it firsthand is illuminating. Nathan chuckled. Well, you're not so bad yourself, you know? I mean, for an alien diplomat and all. She tilted her head, the faint glow on her skin shifting. Not so bad. I meant it as a compliment. I see. Her voice was neutral, but the slightest hint of amusement crept into her tone. Then I will accept it as one. Nathan smiled, folding his arms as he looked back out at the stars. The silence between them was different now, no longer awkward, but almost comfortable. After a moment, he glanced at her again. You really spend all your time doing diplomacy? Don't you ever just take a break? Lin regarded him for a moment before answering. Cerithian society places great emphasis on duty and purpose. It is not common to take a break, as you put it. Not even once in a while, he pressed. She hesitated, then admitted there are occasions. Festivals, cultural gatherings. Rare moments when we set aside our responsibilities. Sounds like you need more of those, Nathan said, his tone light but genuine. I mean, you're allowed to enjoy yourself, right? Even if you're a diplomat. Lin didn't respond right away. Instead, she turned back to the viewport, her gaze distant. Perhaps. Nathan decided not to push further. Instead, he shifted the conversation. You ever see anything like this? He gestured to the stars outside. I mean, you're out here all the time. Bet you've seen some amazing stuff. She nodded slightly. There are worlds so beautiful they defy description. Entire landscapes that glow with their own light, oceans of liquid crystal, skies filled with floating islands. I have seen many such places. Sounds incredible, Nathan said, genuinely impressed. Humans don't have anything like that. At least, not that I've ever seen. You have other qualities, Lin said. Your species has achieved much in a relatively short amount of time. Your adaptability is noteworthy. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Was that another compliment? It was an observation, she said evenly, though there was a faint glimmer of humor in her eyes. I'll take it anyway, Nathan replied. So, what's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen? Lin considered the question, her glowing patterns dimming as she thought. There is a world within the Enderian Nebula, she said at last. A planet surrounded by rings of crystalline ice orbiting a binary star system. During the eclipse, the light refracts through the ice, creating a cascade of colors that dance across the entire sky. It is breathtaking. Nathan whistled softly. That does sound amazing. Wish I could see it. Perhaps one day you will, she said, though her tone made it clear she was not certain. Nathan smiled. If I do, I'll make sure to give you the credit for pointing it out. Lin's expression softened just a fraction. I will hold you to that. They stood in silence for a while longer, watching the stars shift ever so slightly as the ship moved through space. It wasn't exactly a conversation full of deep revelations or dramatic moments. But for Nathan, it felt like something was changing, something subtle but real. The distance between them, once so stark, seemed to be shrinking. They were still two very different people from very different worlds, but maybe that didn't have to be a barrier. Eventually, Lin broke the silence. You should rest. The next repair sequence will require your full attention. Nathan nodded, pushing off the railing. Sure thing. Just let me know when you need me. I will, she said, her voice quiet but steady. As he left the observation deck, he found himself smiling. It wasn't much, just a shared moment, a simple conversation. But it was enough to make him feel a little more connected. A little less alone. And maybe, just maybe, it was the start of something more. Chapter 4, The Festival of Luminescence. The steady hum of the ship's engines was interrupted only by the occasional sound of Lin giving instructions and Nathan muttering to himself as he worked. They had spent most of the day running diagnostics and checking the ship's power systems. Although Lin's knowledge of Zerithian technology far surpassed his own, Nathan had proven he could improvise solutions when necessary. Their partnership, though unlikely, was proving effective. As they finished up a particularly tricky recalibration, Lin straightened and turned to Nathan. That should hold for now. We will need to run another set of diagnostics tomorrow. Nathan nodded, wiping his hands on a rag. Sure. But for tonight, how about we take a break? Lin raised an eyebrow. You have mentioned the concept of taking a break before. Meaning tonight? I figure we're due for a bit of fun. Lin seemed to hesitate. The Festival of Luminescence is a tradition among my people. It is not frivolous entertainment. I never said it was, Nathan replied. It's just that I've been cooped up in this ship for weeks. Seeing some local culture might be nice. And I promise not to cause any trouble. She regarded him for a moment longer before inclining her head. Very well. I will accompany you. Nathan tried not to let his grin get too smug. Sounds good. Let me clean up and I'll meet you at the docking bay. E.S. Lin watched him leave, her expression unreadable. Although she was reluctant to admit it, Nathan's curiosity and persistence had grown on her. He approached everything with a determination that, while sometimes frustrating, was also intriguing. She hadn't intended to bring him along, but now that he was here, she found herself curious about how he would react to the festival. The Festival of Luminescence was held in a wide clearing surrounded by towering crystal-like structures that reflected the gentle glow of Zerithian bioluminescent plants. Dozens of Zerithians had gathered, their translucent skin patterns glowing faintly in a variety of colors. The air was filled with soft, melodic tones that seemed to resonate from the environment itself, creating a serene yet celebratory atmosphere. Nathan looked around, clearly fascinated. This is incredible. It's like the whole place is alive. It is the culmination of months of preparation, E.S. Lin said, her voice calm but tinged with pride. The festival is a time for renewal and reflection. Nathan nodded, still taking it all in. He noticed groups of Zerithians engaged in what looked like dances, their movements graceful and fluid. So, is there some kind of schedule, or do we just jump in? E.S. Lin's lips quirked slightly. You cannot simply jump in. The dances are structured and carry symbolic meaning. To participate, you must first understand the movements and their purpose. Got it. So, you're saying I need a teacher? E.S. Lin gave him a sidelong glance. Are you certain you wish to participate? Why not? Nathan said, grinning. You've been teaching me everything else. How hard could it be? E.S. Lin exhaled softly as if preparing herself for a challenge. Very well. Follow me. She led him to a quieter area away from the larger groups. There, she began demonstrating the basic steps, her movements deliberate and fluid. Nathan did his best to mimic her, but it quickly became clear that human coordination wasn't quite up to Zerithian standards. No, not like that, E.S. Lin said, stepping closer. She placed her hands lightly on his shoulders, adjusting his posture. You must move with the rhythm, not against it. Right, rhythm, Nathan muttered, trying again. This time, he managed to keep his steps in sync with hers, though his movements still felt clumsy. Better, E.S. Lin said, her tone more encouraging. You are beginning to understand. They continued practicing, and slowly but surely, Nathan improved. E.S. Lin guided him patiently, her voice steady as she corrected his form and timing. Despite his initial fumbling, Nathan found himself enjoying the process. The gentle rhythm of the music, the glow of the surroundings, and E.S. Lin's calm guidance created a sense of harmony he hadn't experienced in a long time. You're pretty good at this teaching thing, Nathan said, glancing at her as they moved through the steps. It is my duty to ensure understanding, E.S. Lin replied, though her tone had softened. You are making progress. High praise from you, Nathan said with a chuckle. So, what's the next step? E.S. Lin demonstrated a more intricate movement, her glowing patterns shifting as she moved. Nathan tried to follow, stumbling slightly but recovering quickly. They practiced until the steps felt almost natural, and by the time they rejoined the main group, Nathan was moving with a confidence he hadn't expected. As they danced among the other Zerithians, Nathan noticed how E.S. Lin's movements seemed to reflect the music itself, her glow blending with the surroundings. It was mesmerizing, and for a moment he forgot about their differences. They moved together in harmony, their steps matching as if they had been dancing for years. When the music finally shifted to a slower, more introspective melody, Nathan and E.S. Lin paused. He looked at her, a small smile on his face. I think I get it now. E.S. Lin tilted her head, her expression curious. And what have you learned? That this isn't just a dance, Nathan said. It's something more. A way to connect. E.S. Lin regarded him for a long moment before nodding. Yes. It is a connection. A way to express unity and understanding. Nathan's smile widened. Thanks for teaching me. I know I probably wasn't the easiest student. You have improved, she said, and though her tone was even, there was a faint warmth to her words. They stood there, side by side, watching the other dancers as the festival continued. The experience had left Nathan feeling more connected to this place and to E.S. Lin. For the first time since he'd arrived, he felt like he belonged, at least in some small way. The Festival of Luminescence would continue into the night, but for now, Nathan was content to simply stand there, sharing a quiet moment with his unlikely partner. Chapter 5, Trust in the Shadows. Nathan adjusted the strap on his makeshift shoulder pack, glancing around the dimly lit cargo hold. E.S. Lin was perched on the edge of a nearby crate, her slender fingers flipping through a small holographic display that cast a faint blue glow across her face. They had spent the better part of the day poring over logs and tracking the source of the encrypted messages that had been causing tension within the enclave. The accusations from the neighboring species were clear. The Zerithians were hiding something, possibly even human operatives. Nathan, of course, knew nothing about it, but he could see how the diplomatic stakes were rising. "What did you find?" Nathan asked, breaking the silence. Lin tapped a few more keys on the display before responding. "There is a pattern. The messages appear to originate from a single source within the enclave. It is unlikely that it is random interference." "Okay, so we track the signal, find the source, and clear your people's name," Nathan said, leaning against the wall. "Simple enough." Lin tilted her head slightly. "If only it were that simple. Whoever is behind this has gone to great lengths to mask their transmissions. Even with Zerithian technology, it will take time to pinpoint their exact location." Nathan frowned. "What's the plan, then? Keep poking around until they slip up?" "That is one possibility," she replied, her tone measured. "But we cannot afford to act recklessly. The enclave's stability is fragile. If we move too quickly, we risk alerting the culprit." Nathan scratched the back of his neck, considering her words. "All right, then what's our next step?" "I don't know your tech well enough to help with the code breaking, but I can run interference, talk to people, see if anyone's acting suspicious." Lin gave him a long look. "You would involve yourself in this matter, knowing the risks?" Nathan shrugged. "You think I'm just gonna sit around while you do all the work? Not a chance. We're in this together, remember." She seemed to consider that for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. If you can discreetly gather information from the other inhabitants, it may help us narrow down the possibilities. But remember, we cannot afford to draw attention." "Got it. I'll be subtle," Nathan said, flashing her a lopsided grin. Lin's expression softened slightly, though she quickly turned her attention back to the holographic display. "I will continue working on decrypting the signal. Keep me informed if you uncover anything." As Nathan headed out into the main corridor, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of camaraderie. He and Lin might come from completely different worlds, but their goals were aligned. They weren't just trying to clear their names, they were trying to protect the enclave itself. Several hours later, Nathan returned to the cargo hold, his brow furrowed. Lin looked up from her work, her glow dimming as she gave him her full attention. "Any progress?" she asked. "Some," Nathan said, setting his pack down. "I've been talking to a few folks around the enclave, real casual-like. Most of them don't know anything, but there was this one guy, Corinne, I think his name was, who seemed a little too interested in what I was doing." "Interested how?" Lin asked, standing to face him. "Kept asking me why I was wandering around, what I was looking for," Nathan said. He tried to play it off as friendly curiosity, but it felt off, like he was fishing for information. Lin's glow shifted slightly, a subtle sign of her concern. "Did he say anything that might indicate he's involved?" "Not directly," Nathan admitted. "But he's definitely nervous about something." She nodded slowly. "We must proceed carefully. If he is involved, confronting him could lead him to cover his tracks or alert others." "Yeah, I figured as much," Nathan said. "That's why I didn't press him too hard. But I think we should keep an eye on him." Lin seemed to consider this for a moment before agreeing. "Very well. I will see if I can find any reference to Corinne in the transmission logs. If there is a connection, we may be able to determine his role without tipping him off." "Sounds like a plan," Nathan said, leaning back against a crate. "You know, this whole cloak and dagger stuff isn't exactly what I signed up for, but it's not the worst way to spend my time." Lin gave him a curious look. "You find this enjoyable?" "Not the danger part, no," Nathan replied. "But working with you, trying to solve a problem together? Yeah, I don't mind it." Her expression softened, and she nodded. "I appreciate your assistance. You have been more helpful than I expected." "Wow, twice in one day," Nathan said, grinning. "You're really starting to warm up to me." Lin didn't respond right away, but there was a faint glimmer of amusement in her eyes. "Perhaps," she said at last. As the days went on, Nathan and Lin continued their investigation, each step bringing them closer to the truth. Lin's technical expertise and Nathan's intuition proved to be a surprisingly effective combination. They uncovered small inconsistencies in the logs, patterns that seemed to point toward a hidden terminal deep within the Enclave's network. It wasn't long before they identified the source of the messages, a secluded terminal in one of the maintenance bays. They approached the bay cautiously, Lin leading the way while Nathan kept watch for any sign of trouble. The room was dark, illuminated only by the soft blue glow of Zerithian control panels. Lynn moved swiftly to the terminal, her fingers flying across the interface. "This is it," she said quietly. "The messages originated from this terminal. I am initiating a trace to determine who accessed it." Nathan scanned the room, his hand instinctively moving to his sidearm. "Do it quick. I've got a bad feeling about this." Just as Lynn finished her trace, the door behind them slid open. Nathan spun around, his weapon raised, only to find Corinne standing there, his hands raised defensively. "Wait, I can explain," Corinne said, his voice trembling. "I didn't mean for it to get this far." Lynn turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You are the one responsible for the transmissions." "I had no choice," Corinne stammered. "They threatened my family. I never wanted to cause harm." "I just needed to buy some time." Nathan stepped forward, his tone firm. "And what exactly were you buying time for? Who's behind this?" Corin hesitated, his gaze darting between them. "I don't know their names. They're outsiders. Not Zerithian. They forced me to send the messages to make it look like we were hiding something." Lynn's glow brightened slightly as she considered his words. "If what you say is true, we must address this quickly. The longer this continues, the greater the risk to the Enclave." Nathan lowered his weapon slightly. "All right, Corinne. If you want to fix this, now's your chance. Help us find these outsiders and stop them before they do any more damage." Corin nodded, his expression a mix of fear and relief. "I'll tell you everything I know." As the three of them left the maintenance bay, Nathan exchanged a glance with Lynn. They still had a long way to go, but for the first time it felt like they were making real progress. Trust was fragile, but it was growing, and for now that was enough to keep them moving forward. Chapter 6, A New Horizon. Nathan leaned against the bulkhead, watching Lynn work. She sat at the ship's central console, her fingers moving swiftly across the interface as streams of Zerithian text scrolled across the screen. Her focused expression never wavered, though her glowing skin shifted faintly, something Nathan had come to recognize as a sign she was deep in thought. "So," he said, breaking the silence, "you really think this plan will work?" Lynn didn't look up, but she responded evenly. "If the data we extracted from Corinne's terminal is accurate, then yes. We can trace the transmissions back to their source and confront those responsible. With evidence of their actions, the Enclave's reputation will be restored." Nathan nodded slowly. "And what happens to Corinne?" "That is not for me to decide," Lynn replied. "He acted under duress, but his actions still caused harm. The Enclave's council will determine his fate." "Fair enough," Nathan said. He shifted his weight, glancing out the viewport at the stars. I know what it's like to be put in an impossible situation. Sometimes you make the wrong call because you feel like you don't have a choice." Lynn paused, her glowing patterns dimming slightly. "That may be true. But our choices, even those made under pressure, still carry consequences. Corinne must face those consequences, as we all must." Nathan gave her a long look. "You sound pretty sure of that." She turned to meet his gaze. "It is a fundamental principle of Zerithian society. We value accountability even when the circumstances are difficult." "Yeah," Nathan said softly. "I get that." For a moment, the two of them simply looked at each other. Then Lynn turned back to her work. Nathan watched her for a while longer before speaking again. "Look, I'm not great at saying this kind of thing, but you've been solid through all this. I know I can be a pain sometimes." "Sometimes?" Lynn interjected, a faint hint of amusement in her voice. "Okay, often," Nathan said with a grin. "But seriously, you've had my back, and I appreciate it." Lynn's hands stilled on the console. She looked up at him, her expression softening. "You have contributed much as well, Nathan Reyes. Your unconventional approach has proven valuable." "I'll take that as a compliment," Nathan said, though his tone was more sincere than joking. Lynn nodded. It was intended as one. The ship's console beeped, breaking the moment. Lynn turned back to the screen, studying the data. "The trace is complete. The source of the transmissions is located on the far side of the Enclave, near the communications array." "Then we know where to go," Nathan said, straightening. "What's the plan?" Lynn stood, her movements graceful as always. "We confront the individuals responsible and present the evidence. If they refuse to cooperate, we will alert the Enclave's security forces." "And if they don't listen to reason?" Nathan asked. "They will," Lynn said firmly. "They have no choice. The evidence is irrefutable." Nathan smiled wryly. "You're pretty confident, huh?" "I am confident in the truth," she replied. All right then, Nathan said, checking his sidearm. Let's get this over with. They approached the communications array under the cover of night. The enclave was quiet, the usual hum of activity replaced by an eerie stillness. Nathan stayed close to Es Lin, his senses on high alert. They reached the designated location, a small, nondescript building nestled at the edge of the enclave's perimeter. This is it, Es Lin said quietly. The transmissions originated from inside. All right, Nathan said, his voice equally low. How do you want to do this? Going loud or try to talk our way through? Es Lin considered for a moment. We will speak first. If they cooperate, there will be no need for conflict. Works for me, Nathan said, though he kept his hand near his weapon just in case. Es Lin stepped forward and activated the door panel. It slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a dimly lit interior. Inside, two figures turned toward them, their expressions a mix of surprise and defiance. Nathan immediately recognized one of them from the Enclave's meetings, a Zerithian named Thalix, who had always seemed overly interested in human affairs. Thalix, Es Lin said, her voice steady. We have traced the transmissions to this location. You and your associate have some explaining to do. Thalix's glow brightened slightly, a sign of agitation. You have no authority here, Es Lin. This is a private matter. It ceased to be private when you jeopardized the Enclave's reputation, Es Lin replied. We have the evidence. Cease your activities now and the council may be lenient. The other figure, a younger Zerithian, stepped forward. You don't understand. We're trying to protect the Enclave. The outsiders. They promised they would leave us alone if we sent those messages. Nathan frowned. Promised? So you made a deal with them? A deal that put everyone here at risk. It wasn't supposed to be like this, the younger Zerithian said, their glow dimming in distress. We thought we could keep them away. By framing your own people? Es Lin asked, her voice sharp. You have done more harm than good. Thalix's glow brightened again, his tone defensive. We were protecting our future. Sometimes sacrifices must be made. Nathan stepped forward. Yeah? Well, maybe you should have asked everyone else before you decided to make those sacrifices. Thalix scowled at him. What would a human know about protecting this enclave? More than you think. Nathan shot back. Because unlike you, I'm not throwing innocent people under the bus to make myself feel safer. Es Lin raised a hand, silencing both of them. Enough. The evidence will be presented to the council. They will decide your fate. Thalix hesitated, but eventually nodded. Fine. Do what you must. Nathan relaxed slightly, though he kept a wary eye on Thalix and his associate as Es Lin secured the terminal. Together, they returned to the main enclave with the incriminating data in hand. Later, as they stood in the enclave's central square, Nathan turned to Es Lin. You think this will be enough to clear things up? Es Lin nodded. The council values truth. With this evidence, they will see that the enclave was not at fault. It will take time to rebuild trust, but it can be done. Nathan sighed, glancing around at the bustling enclave. Well, that's something, at least. You have done much to help achieve this outcome, Es Lin said, her tone calm but warm. You should be proud. Proud, huh? Nathan said, a small smile tugging at his lee. To have played a part in setting things right. And as he looked over at Es Lin, he couldn't help but feel that their partnership, unlikely as it had been, had turned into something more. Something worth holding on to.